Well, thank you for joining me on the ProBrick exclusive channel. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison on the Central Coast, New South Wales. I want to speak to you today about what we are building our lives on. The question is, what are we building our lives on? And it's a very important question. We all have a default in our psyche. We all have a psychology inside us, a set of values, core values that we fall back on when things get tough. And those defaults may not necessarily be where we want to fall. A lot of people fall into the arms of, I know I give it a caning, alcohol. Alcohol's got a way of interrupting so many areas of your life, it's not funny, particularly if it's abused. It releases a lot of cortisol in your body, and that can upset your nervous system, your sleeping patterns, and all other stuff that you really don't want to mess with. But, being a legal substance, I guess that justifies it to some extent. But history has proven that alcohol really doesn't do society any good. It doesn't do families any good. How many wives have left their husbands and things because of the trouble that alcohol's caused? So then there's drugs. Then there's other addictions that people fall back on into when the going gets tough. So what am I trying to say? You'll see on the screen we have the ancient scriptures, Christian scriptures from the New Testament. And Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, the Christian Saviour, asked his followers and listeners this question, and I'm going to ask it to you, given its ancient text, rich in wisdom, and takes us back into alignment with the old value system which actually worked, unlike the new one today which doesn't, where there's lying and cheating and scheming. Not that these things weren't present in those days, but they were more faced with punishment than what they are today. I mean, you literally can do whatever you like today as long as you don't murder somebody. But he asks the question to his listeners and he says, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine. Now, the ultimate saying of Christ and does them, so there's an actual intellectual intake and then a mental and physical outworking of what he has said. And believe me, the ultimate thing that he said was to love your neighbour as yourself, which means, if you want an interpretation of that, not to harm yourself or anybody else. You're not to harm yourself or anybody else. That's what loving your neighbour as yourself essentially means. And so the Lord, Jesus, the prophet, or whatever you think he is, you can determine that for yourself, says this: whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them. This is somebody that's prepared to love their neighbour as themselves. So we've got to look at this. The fundamental foundation of what he's saying is, if you can manage to not harm yourself, and thereby in doing that, the appreciation and the rewards of that, be able to, where you engage or interact with people in your world or your sphere, want to see them be well, happy and healthy. This is what he will liken you to. Jesus said, I will liken that person to a wise person who built their house on the rock. And the rain... Now, what is the rock? Let's just do this as we go. What is the rock? The rock is to love your neighbour as yourself. That's the golden rule. That's the main, ultimate thing that Jesus required through Christianity. If you do not harm yourself or anybody else, you are likened to a wise man. So what does it mean then if we see people abusing alcohol, drugs, and other forms of abuse which we get tangled up in that can be justified but isn't? What can we liken these types to? We'll find out in a minute. but they're definitely not building on a rock. They haven't got, and being masonry contractors, many of you, and in the building game, you'd understand the importance of a foundation. I'm sure most of you have seen more than one part or all of a foundation failure. And this is basically what he is saying. If you're not following the golden rule, if you're not loving yourself and thereby having the capacity and forthrightness to love your neighbour as yourself, then you are not building on a rock. And what happens is the rain descended, and this is equivalent to the things that happen in your mind and in your life and the circumstances around you psychologically and physically in your life. The rains descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house or that person, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. And the rock is the golden rule, to love your neighbour as yourself, to look after yourself, and where you engage others to do the right thing by them. You will not fall. You've got a more higher chance of making it than somebody that isn't. The second part is the opposite. But whoever hears these sayings of mine, so these people have heard the same saying that you should love your neighbour as yourself, and does not do them, he will be likened to a foolish man who built his house on the sand. Which brings us back to the original question of what are we building on and what is our default? See, we will go back to our default. In some cases, it's rock. In other cases, it's sand. And this is what I want you guys that are listening to this talk to stop just in your own personal way and ask yourself, am I defaulting onto sand? Am I managing things the way that I should be, or am I falling into a situation where I'm proving that my life's built on sand? Could be the way you talk to your wife. Could be the way you treat your children, and the wife don't like it, and she's trying to help you adjust, but you keep falling into the sand, as it were. You're not developing yourself in a way in which you're changing that sand into rock, because foundations can be fixed. Default points in our character and mind and emotions can be changed and strengthened. And he goes on to say, and the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew on that person. The troubles come. You know what it's like. Oh, there's a big bill. Shivers, how are we going to pay that? Oh, the missus. Oh, who are you talking to? There's a point of insecurity. Who are you talking to today? What? Show me your phone. Insecurity. Maybe it's valid, maybe it's not. But there's ways in which you deal with these things that are going to produce positive results. Again, knowing that not all people are living by the principle of love your neighbour as yourself. Not all people are living by the principle of do no harm to yourself or anybody else. And what that creates is then, if you come into this place where your life is starting to build on the rock, and you're trying to deal with somebody that's built on the sand, or they got one foot in the sand and another foot on the rock, it always leads to a bending towards evil, a bending towards a not so good outcome, an unhealthy outcome. And what I'm trying to say to you today is you must have a foundation in your life built on the ancient, proven values that uphold the foundation of doing no harm to yourself with the objective to do no harm to anybody else. That's all the Bible is about in terms of what you need to do. That's all these ancient scripts ultimately consummate into. Do no harm to yourself. Right? That's the foundation of the rock, which is what Jesus showed, didn't he? But then you go, well, why did he get crucified? Because not everybody's lives were built on the rock, on this principle. And they crucified him, didn't they? They crucified the Lord. But he knew, and that's why he was saying, build your life in a way in which you're not harming yourself or anybody else. Because usually we harm the people closest to us, and our self-awareness is so poor we don't even know we're doing it until it's too late, and then something bad happens and we wish we had listened. And great is the fall. But as Jesus says, if you're founded on the rock, you don't need to fall so far. You can fall in a way in which the people around you will be willing to help you, because they know your first priority is to look after yourself. And that multiplies, that moves on to the people around you. That becomes the circle of value. That becomes what's important, health. Because people get tired of seeing people abusing themselves and hurting themselves and making excuses for it. And with all these mental health things today, all these mental health excuses that people have today, I mean, it's a minefield of excuses for weakness, isn't it? So what I'm saying to you today, guys, and this is what I'll finish with, is ask yourself the question, like I do every day. Am I building my life in a way in which people can turn around and say, he's building his life on the rock? He has a solid life. Not because he's wealthy, not because he gets everything right, but because he's doing his best to be the best that he can with what he has. Okay? What he has. We ain't running on the hamster wheel here. We're keeping it where it's supposed to be at. Because we've all lived with a foundation of sand, and we've all paid the price for that. And a lot of you are still paying that price. You don't need to live that way. Stop. Just have a quiet little sensitive look at yourself. Ask yourself, are there things that I can change, that I need to change to help improve my immediate relationships and myself? Identify what they are. Take micro incremental steps towards resolving that. You'll take usually 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But when the 1 step back comes, don't give in. Just go, okay, I'll take another 2 steps forward, so on and so forth, and progressively help yourself to come out of the sand, pull yourself out of the sand. And there could be several areas where this needs to happen. You could be on the verge of hurting yourself so much with habits that organs are starting to fail, and you know you're not well. But you can stop and go, I can change this. I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to see what's going on, and I'm going to start making steps to showing the people that love me that I care about myself, and it's worth them caring about me. Because this culture of self-abuse for fame, that's what it is. Self-abuse for identification. Look at me. My identity's tied up in how much I can drink and smoke. No. It's just going to lead to death. So, what are we going to do? We're going to take small, micro, incremental steps towards getting our feet out of the sand to 1 foot in the sand to 1 foot on the rock, and then we're going to get the other foot over on that rock, and we're going to live a life in which we show the people and ourselves that we care about ourselves in a way in which we want to be healthy, and we care about ourselves in a way in which shows that you care about the people that are closest to you, so that the care they're giving to you is worth their effort. This is Pro Bricky on Pro Bricky exclusive YouTube channel. Like, share and subscribe to the channel. Let's build this channel, guys. It's going to be for people that want to change some things in their life. It's not about perfection. It's not about this, that, and all the other. It's about micro incremental steps to getting yourself back, coming back to yourself, coming back to your health as best as you can, coming out of the wreckage, out of this pattern of life that seems all so wonderful, but it's not as you get older, and living the days that we have left ahead of us, because none of us know how many we've got, as best as we can. Bye for now.